Hello everyone, I'm Victoria, your tutor. I just thought I'd do a little video about visual analysis, which is what we are asking you to do in the first short assignment that is coming up fairly soon. You will have seen the instructions for that assignment already. So what I'm going to do is just share a quick PowerPoint with you and have a look at a painting and give you a bit of advice on visual analysis in case it's not clear what it is you're being asked to do. So let me just share my screen. This is the one. Get rid of, sorry, my lighting is very bad. So it's better if you don't see me anyway. So visual analysis is focusing on the visual components of a work of art and showing how they reveal or create meaning in the context of the theme you have chosen. And I've adapted that particularly to fit the exercise that you've been given to do. You're asked to choose a work of art and relate it to one of the 4 themes that we've already looked at on the course. Visual components are things like colour, space. I'll talk about these less abstractly when I'm showing you an actual painting, but colour, space, the way space is created and depicted, the figures themselves, what they look like, how they are created, anatomy and things like that, the light in the painting and the light source, where the light source is, where the light's coming from, and how that affects what we see in the painting, arrangement of objects, which sounds a bit odd on its own, but again will become clearer when we look at the painting itself. So it's things like that. It's just looking at the painting and thinking about how it's constructed. Basically it's the how as well as the what of what's in the painting. Look beyond what's there and think about how the artist has created. This is why painting is actually easier for this first assignment than sculpture, because there's just more of these visual components to talk about. But if your heart is set on other things, certainly visual analysis works on any work of art, but these things, as you can see, are particularly drawn from painting. The 4 themes we've looked at so far: art and artists in week 1, patronage in week 2, portraiture in week 3, and then this week we're on private devotion. So you need to choose a painting or a work of art and think about one of those 4 themes. And one of the key things to do, as I've said in the notes, I think I've said in the notes that I sent around, is to make sure that it's a suitable painting, that you've got something that you can talk about in terms of one of those themes, and that it's got enough in it that you can write a short essay on it. It's only 500 words, which is just really, it's just a couple of longish paragraphs, 2 or 3 paragraphs. More of that in a moment. Make clear from the start which of these 4 themes it is that you have chosen, and then relate the visual components of the work you've chosen to that theme. That's basically what you're being asked to do. And the analysis part is taking those visual components and showing how they reveal meaning, excuse me, in terms of that particular theme. So stick to your theme. Don't just write about the painting. You've got a theme. We've discussed the themes. You've got the online material and the forum discussions to show you the kind of ideas and questions we were thinking about in terms of those themes. So choose your work of art and then choose your theme. Some works obviously will work better with some themes than others. Portraiture obviously will work for a portrait, but a portrait can also be allowed to well, possibly all the other things, but certainly art and artists and patronage. Some of them will relate to private devotion as well. So yeah, it's about choosing the right work of art for the right theme, or the right theme for the right work of art. Most of the paintings that you will be thinking about can probably be allied to at least one of those themes. So make it clear. What I would suggest you do at the top is write out the title of the painting. I think I've got that on the next screen actually. The title of the painting, the artist, title, date, and current location is good. You can also put a link to an online version. You can put a copy of the image yourself if you want to. That's not essential as long as we've got a link to an online version to make sure that we're looking at the right painting. So put that at the top and then say which theme it is before you start. None of that will count as part of your word count. That's just telling me what you're actually writing about. Here are some things that are partly on that document that I sent, but just to reinforce some key things. The date is crucial. Make sure and that's how you avoid a painting that's of the wrong date as well. And the dimensions of the painting are worth putting in. You can put all of this as part of your title. You know, when they've said artist, date, title, location, you can put the medium if you want, oil on panel or whatever it is. And the dimensions are part of the visual analysis. The size of the painting is part of its meaning. And the theme, you can use the first sentence to do that, or you can just put the theme at the top, again, as part of your title. It depends how tight you are for the word count. And then observation is the next thing. What are the key visual components? And then ask the questions. And the big question really, as I've said, is how has the painter done this? Not just what is in the painting, that's kind of description, but how has he created this painting? Because nothing is in that painting that he hasn't. It's occasionally she, but it's more usually at this stage he hasn't chosen to put, not just in the painting, but in that particular place. So it's the how as well as the what. Don't worry about lots of background information and biographical detail. This is an exercise purely in looking at a painting. You've only got 500 words. Don't spend the first paragraph telling me all about the particular painter that you've chosen. I don't need to know that in terms of the analysis of the painting. And don't describe. Sometimes you'll want to describe an element within it, but don't leave it at description. You, when you're looking at the painting, might describe it. You might write a description of it. That's often a good place to start, but then that doesn't come into your final essay. It just means that it shows that you've looked at all the different details. You know, a little bit of description may come in, but only if it's going to then be analysed and some meaning drawn out of it. And then, excuse me, I'm sorry, my voice is croaky tonight. Draw together your own observations of those visual components and the ideas about your chosen theme that they relate to. That's essentially what you're being asked to do, to look carefully, to look closely at a painting, think about what's in the painting and how it's arranged, and then draw that together in terms of how this painting conveys meaning or meanings in relation to the theme that you have chosen. Now, I've got a painting here, as you can see, by the one artist that I've told you not to talk about. And that's partly why I've chosen him, because it might ram that home pretty much every time we run this course. Somebody writes about Van Eyck, and Jan van Eyck is too early for our period. There's another course, Van Eyck to Memling. He's right at the start of this, what we call the Ars Nova. Some of you have picked up on that. So I thought I would talk about a painting that is outside our period, so that I don't tread on anyone's toes or write your essay for you by choosing a work that one of you might choose. So I thought I'll choose something outside the period. And this is also quite a good painting to discuss, because there's a lot in it, there's a lot of detail. So you may or may not know this painting, but it's the Arnolfini portrait by Jan van Eyck, and its date is 1434. It's quite rare to have a very specific date for a painting of that time, but that's one of the details in the painting. You can expand this, actually I might be able to make that a bit bigger. The back here, Johannes de Eyck, Fuit Hick, Johan van Eyck, Jan van Eyck was here, and then the date underneath, which is difficult to read on this slide, but it says 1434. So very helpfully, Jan van Eyck has given us the date and his signature on the painting. Very rare for this date. So that's a detail that you might want to pick out. Now, for a painting like this, it's obviously a portrait of these two people. So you could be talking about portraiture. You could talk about patronage. You could talk about Jan van Eyck in terms of and what he's doing as an artist, the art and artist theme. Personal devotion also, there's an element of that in here, but it's not really a focus of the painting. But you could certainly choose any one of the themes really, but the first three would be quite rich in terms of how you can analyse this painting. So what have we got? A man and a woman, this is description, standing in a very well furnished expensively furnished room. There's a window on the left with light coming through it, but there's also light shining onto their faces from a window clearly that's out of the screen, out of the picture as well, shining forwards onto them from the left-hand side. Shoes in the foreground here, what are called patterns. Little dog in the foreground. There's fruit on the bench here. There's a chandelier with one lit candle. There's a mirror on the back wall with a rosary next to it. There's a bed here and carvings on the bed. The couple are standing quite formally. He is taking her hand, holding up his right hand. And there are all sorts of things then that you can draw out of how Van Eyck has created um, a picture that has meaning, as I say, for the different themes. So if we think about it as portraiture, that's the most obvious thing. So I'm going to say that I'm looking at this painting, the Arnolfini portrait. It used to be called the Arnolfini wedding or the Arnolfini marriage. It's now called the portrait because it's disputed that there is a marriage taking place. It's a portrait, even if we don't know who it's of, we can still say a lot about this painting. These are wealthy people, two wealthy people standing in a bedroom, and this tells us that they are of a particular class, but there are other clues around the room that will also tell us that. So the bed, for example, and the brass chandelier, the fact that this is a well-furnished room with just the edging of a Persian carpet on the floor. These are expensive items. Even the oranges strewn casually on the windowsill, or well, there's one on the windowsill on the bench here. These would be imported probably from Spain, and again a sign of wealth. They are finely dressed in luxurious sort of clothing. She has a woolen gown over her underdress lined with ermine. He is wearing what looks like a velvet sort of cape cloak lined with edged with fur, this very fine hat. A bed is a sign of luxury, a sign of wealth. Not everybody had certainly a bed as posh as this, but often a bed like this would be put into the sort of reception room rather than the bed that they actually slept in. So it tells us that this is a wealthy couple. It's the interior is a domestic interior of the 15th century in the Netherlands. And they are being presented to us quite formally, and this is where it gave rise to the idea that it was a wedding. You don't have to bring in a lot of what you've read. This is in that sense a bad painting to have chosen because a lot has been said, but for this first exercise it's more a question of look at the colours that Van Eyck uses, the red and the green and the blue, and how that sort of balances the composition, but also the contrast that there is between the woman in green and blue, bright colours, and the man in his much more sober costume that is mostly black. The velvet looks like a kind of dark purplish brown, but somber colours. He has these shoes here in the corner that are the kind of shoes that you would put on over your indoor shoes when you go out to keep the mud off them. I don't know how they walk in these things, but that's not part of the visual analysis. But they have been discarded. So he's come in from outside, and he is here. Now, what this gesture is interesting, and again, it's sometimes been seen as a gesture of a formal oath, which is also what led to the idea that it might be a wedding, but it's also a gesture that's used for welcome. And if you look very closely at the mirror at the back, you can see a reflection of the room, and here are the backs. This is the back of the man and the woman, and then there's a doorway here. You can expand this on the internet, the beauty of the internet, to be much larger. There are two people coming through the door, and it seems as though Arnolfini, again, it doesn't matter that it's Arnolfini for the moment, but that he may be welcoming them in and presenting his wife to them. There's the other question of whether she might be pregnant. She isn't necessarily, but she may well be. This dress that she's wearing, this overdress, is made of thick woolen woven material with, as you can see, completely lined with ermine, so it's quite a bulky garment, and she's holding up the folds at the front, which would create a lot of volume. And if you look at other paintings from the period, you will see women holding their garments like that, but also women often have quite swollen stomachs even when they're not pregnant. Um, Even female saints sometimes stand like this, and they most certainly are not pregnant. On the other hand, just looking at details again, right at the back here on the bed, and you can't see that very clearly now, but you can expand that. This little carving on the bedstead here is of Saint Margaret being swallowed by the dragon. Now, the legend of Saint Margaret is that the dragon swallowed her and she came out the other end whole. She didn't die. She was intact when she came out. And so she is the patron saint of childbirth because of offering an example of safe delivery. So there is a clue there that she may well be pregnant. So we've got a couple here who seem to be celebrating their couplehood, and the fact that they are wealthy people, but clearly not aristocratic people. They're not wearing any fine jewellery or show any accoutrements of any office or high class in society. Tells us something about the fact that these are a class of people now wealthy enough to have their portrait painted. I've used a lot more than 500 words, so you just, and there's things I haven't talked about here, but I hope that's given you some idea of just looking at the painting. Don't worry about too much extraneous information. Sometimes you can bring that in, it's fine, but we're more interested in you looking at a painting and thinking about what you see in the painting and how that tells us something about the theme of the artist, of patronage, of portraiture, of devotion in the 15th, 16th century, whatever the date of your particular painting is. Do make sure that your painting is from after 1480 or 1480 onwards, no later than 1580, but you're unlikely to go. It's normally the problems normally come at the other end, and there are grey areas. Somebody like Hans Memling, for example, who has paintings either side. As long as the painting itself is 1480 and beyond, that's fine. It doesn't have to be a painting that we've covered on the course or in the course books. But if you choose one of your own, do be careful that it's something about which there is enough to say, and that that is within the right dates, and that fits the kind of ethos of what we're looking at in these first 4 units. Don't be too ambitious. It's simply an exercise of writing 500 words, looking at a work of art, thinking about what is in it, how it's been composed. I haven't talked about the space here and the use of a kind of perspective. There's all sorts more that you could say about this. The construction of the space, but that's not necessarily relevant to the theme of portraiture. But there are, if you were talking about art and artists, for example, you could talk about how Van Eyck creates the illusion of space, and you could talk about how he uses oil paint to create different textures and surfaces and makes things seem very real, as against the fact that, for example, the anatomy of the woman particularly is quite stylized. She is this Gothic form of sort of very narrow shoulders, small breast, very long limbs, a sort of elongated figure, really. These Gothic-y sort of hands, not the anatomical robustness that we might associate with, say, an Italian painter who's looking at Roman sculpture, for example. So there's elements of realism, there's elements of artifice, but he uses oil paint to create these wonderful effects, that extraordinary mirror, the translucent amber beads of the rosary, the light on the brass chandelier, for example, and then all of that contrasted with the wood grain of the floor and the different fabrics that they're wearing. So if you're talking about art and artist, those are the things that you might want to focus on, and how innovative Van Eyck is being in using this medium to create particular effects. So hopefully that's been a bit helpful. Do ask me any questions that you might have. I'm trying not to make this too long. It's probably too long already. Let me just stop sharing my screen. And sorry, I'd rather look at Van Eyck than look at me. Thank you for watching, and I hope some of you will be writing assignments. It would be great to have those. And do email me if you have any specific queries, or if you're still unsure about anything, and I'll try to answer those. So thank you, and I will see you on the forums.